Um, we're going to be finishing out chapter 1. We're really close to being done. Just a few more basic terms and concepts to get out of the way, and we're going to gently start chapter 2. Now that I did the class on Monday, I know where we stopped at. So, and chapter 2 is all about different perspectives and theories about what happens to us when we get older from a psychological and a biological point of view. And then there's a few, maybe some of you have already watched this. Maybe you did it on Monday during your class time. Although I'm not sure if you did that or not. What you were seeing, some of you came in, I was actually reviewing, just making sure it was all working. It's a really cool little video called 90 Plus. And it all has to do with that survivor principle that we talked about. What's the difference between 90-year-olds who live into their 90s and maybe Mr. Overton? Remember Mr. Overton? What's different about people that survive and people that don't? Really cool study that was done. There was this place built way back in the 50s called Leisure World. And Leisure World was one of the first retirement homes for older people ever created in this country. And you had to be the ripe old age of 52 to get into Leisure World, right? But remember, like, when people die, and there was this place built so that old 52-year-olds could live out the rest of their life in harmony and dancing and playing bingo and all that stuff that you think about with retirement homes. Well, a lot of them are still alive, and they're all over the age of 90, and people have tracked them down. Doctors and scientists have tracked them down, and they're studying them to see what's different about you than all the people and your friends and spouses that have passed away in their 60s or 70s and 80s. And I think you'll be both, well, it's interesting, and I think you'll be surprised by a lot of the things that they found and a lot of the advice that those older people have. And then there's 2 primers, some things that we'll review a little bit, we'll really briefly touch on today, but 2 different theoretical perspectives just to get it out of the way. Quick videos on Freud and quick video on someone named Erik Erikson. If you don't know who those are, definitely watch those. Some of you have probably heard of them already anyway, so it might be like a primer for just review. So do remember when we have quizzes, I guess this is the first test to see if you're actually paying attention to the online stuff, right? Like I told the other section, when I make a quiz, that stuff can be on there. Of course it is. It's part of the class just like this is, but I do emphasize the in-class stuff more than that. Just so you know. I mean, in other words, I'm not going to ask, like, from that video, like, what was Sid, the guy with dementia, what color was his tie in the document? It's going to be, I would ask you questions that would definitely gauge, hey, did you actually watch this and pay attention? Were you conscious? Or did you just skip over? So, there you go. That's week 3. Well, this is week 3. Let's see. Other than that, I think we're good. We're not there yet. Oh, we're not to you yet. Here we go. This is where I wanted to start. So we call the first part, I guess, the end of chapter 1. This is what you could call it in your notes. If you give yourselves headers, I'm going to change the way this looks just a little bit. There we go. I mean, last week you watched the video with Dale. We had a discussion question about that. Dale talked about how we define adulthood in so many different ways. So it does kind of beg the question of what is the meaning of this number anyway? Or is it just kind of arbitrary? So just to walk you through, you've already done this. That's my slide on Dale. In the normal universe, we'd be watching that together. But here you go. We love, in the world of human development, we love breaking down your life into different stages so that we can talk about you and have classes about you. We have classes on early childhood, classes on middle childhood, classes on adolescence. And, we got all those other fun stages like the prenatal stage and all those. Well, we also break down adulthood. Adulthood is broken down into several different stages, the first of which you are actually in. So emerging adulthood, this is anywhere between the ages of 18 and, you might be surprised, where would you guess this ends? 29. You might be surprised how long this goes. So emerging adulthood, you can see that number, 29, tries to cover, the reason it's pushed out that long is to cover all the bases from neuroscience, social aspects, responsibility, The fact that more and more people are going to college, more and more people are going to grad school before they're starting careers and actually moving out of their homes. It also uses, you don't need to write all these things down, but if you're wondering what factors into this, what's the average age when people get married for the first time? Not that you need to be an adult to get married, but it's about 30. For both men and women, the average age of first marriages today is about 30 years old. So if you're wondering, like, I haven't found that someone just yet, it's okay. You're still a decade away from the average when people in this country get married for the first time. And now kids aren't even born until like age 31 or 32. So you got a ways to go. So emerging adulthood is 18 to 29. Then we have this wonderful stage called early adulthood, which thankfully I'm still in. I'm on the latter end of it, but it makes me feel good. I'm still an early adult. And this is anywhere between the ages of 30 and 45. Of course, early adulthood, maybe you're starting a career, maybe you are getting married, maybe not, doesn't matter. Maybe you're starting a family, but you're getting going. Then we have middle adulthood. You've heard of a midlife crisis. We'll actually talk about in this class. Is that real, or is it just a myth? Do people actually go through something called a midlife crisis? Maybe some do, but we'll save that for later. So middle adulthood, anywhere between the ages of 45-ish and 65. And then 65 up is what we call late adulthood. That'll become a focus of the class in a little bit. Who picked age 65? You don't need to write this down, but why? Because we picked it a really long time ago, and a lot of people argue that maybe we should change this now because we're not dying when we're 49 or even 65. I'm glad you don't know. She's coming. So 65 up, but 65 up is. Now, that's not it. We actually break this down. Now that we have so many people living longer, this late adulthood stage is broken down into other stages. So you can think about your parents. Well, I'm not sure how old your parents are. Maybe your grandparents. When you first get into 65 and up, if you've made it that far, congratulations, you're now considered young old, which might sound counterintuitive to your brain to put those two words together. But this is anywhere between the age of 65 and 74. So you go into your 70s, you're old, but in terms of being old today in the United States, you're considered young. You're on the young end of old. And this is typically most older people, if you want to call them that, they're still really active, still doing things, probably living on their own, probably still married, enjoying part of life that generations ago couldn't do. Well, then we have the older old, which also sounds probably silly to say inside your head, but yes, it is actually called that. In fact, that 90-plus documentary opens up with Leslie Stahl defining that. She's talking about people over 90. The old is people between the ages of 74 and 85. The 90-plus documentary is people that are considered the oldest old. Isn't that a compliment? So you hit the age 85 up, congratulations, that's it. You're in the last category. You made it all the way from prenatal to oldest old. That's your goal. Well, of course, right? 2021, we're living longer. There's actually, believe it or not, 2 more stages. You might have heard of this. Centenarian is anyone? Well, this is Mr. Overton. How old was he in that documentary? Do you remember? He was 109. So he is a centenarian. So anyone living above the age of 100. Did you notice in that documentary that we watched that it didn't come from the federal government? It's not like you get something in the mail like, hey, congratulations, you're over 100. But his town had given him these little plaques and every year that he made it. But there's one more category, believe it or not, today that didn't even exist as a category to even talk about. And that's a super centenarian. And that is anyone above the age of 110. And we emphasized it last week, but just in general, this group here, the oldest old, 85 and up, So that would include our centenarians and super centenarians, but the oldest old is the fastest growing segment of our population, and it's not even close. And just to, I guess, put a bookend, I think I was talking about this with Dante before he left, but Mr. Overton did pass away. He made it to the age of 112.
A hero and a legend. Richard Overton, America's oldest World War II veteran and the oldest man in the United States, passed away Thursday at the age of 112. Overton joined the Army in 1942 and served with the All-Black Unit in the Pacific. At a Veterans Day ceremony in 2013, former President Obama told of how Overton escaped death many times.
He was there at Pearl Harbor when the battleships were still smoldering. He was there at Okinawa. He was there at Iwo Jima, where he said, "I only got out of there by the grace of God." This veteran held his head high. He carried on and lived his life with honor and dignity.
Overton gave credit to God for living so long, but he also said that he enjoyed the vices of life. He said he drank whiskey in his coffee and enjoyed ice cream every night. And I will now change my nightly habits as well.
Actually, that's kind of planting a seed for you. That was unintentional. I actually forgot they mentioned that. So, I'll be a little spoiler alert for you. One thing you're going to learn in that 90+ video is that, well, a lot of people your age might worry about the wrong things, I guess, when it comes to living longer, right? Like, we always have to eat exactly right and stay away from alcohol and don't drink too much coffee. And what you'll learn really quickly in that documentary is that actually might be maybe the wrong category of stuff to put your energy in. It actually doesn't matter as much as you think it might. But I'll leave that up for you to discover. This is other stuff. Here we go. So the next thing to write down, so we're done with all these categories. In the world of human development and family science, which is a wonderful major I encourage you to join here at the University of Mount Union, or developmental psychology, age, the number of your age, is absolutely arbitrary and not important. When people actually study, I mean, it's cool to say you're 96, it's cool to say you're 78, you made it. But the number of your age, how many times you've gone around the sun, is meaningless in terms of human development. The term that people that study human development use to talk about people getting older is something called functional age, not a number. Your functional age. And it's broken down, and you're going to see this theme running through this class. It's broken down into your biological age, your psychological age, and of course, your social age. I think I mentioned this to you guys. Like, how old is this guy? Do you remember? I feel like he popped up. He's 75 years old. Well, let's start with, so the functional age. What does this term mean? Functional age simply means how well are you and your body performing regardless of your age. How well are you and your body performing regardless of your age? I know you're young, but as we go through these, just, I don't know, give yourself a score of how, right, and even though you can still do it now, right, but you're 20. Maybe you've seen these. They were kind of a fad for a while. I haven't actually explored it for a while, but there's websites you can go to and enter in certain information like your blood pressure and your height and your weight and what you do for a living and are you married or not, and it'll spit out an age, right? And sometimes people end up older than they actually are. Oh my God, my body is older. But sometimes people who are 70 take it and says, you have the body of a 50, right? Some people actually come out younger. Well, what those websites are using is the concept of functional age. Regardless of what your actual number is, how well are you and your body performing? So we break this down. We're actually going to have some things underneath each of these. Your biological functional age. Each of these has a really, really long list. I'm making the list a lot shorter. So the main ones that get focused on. So if you took a test to figure out what your functional age is, here's what it would focus on. And the biological, it's probably things that you would automatically think of, like commonsensical. Number one is your cardiovascular health. I did this once. This is connected to another story that some of you know more about. When I was about 30-ish, I was having panic attacks, like all the time. I thought something was wrong with my heart. So I went to get my heart studied so I could figure out, am I going to die? Am I having I'm 30 years old, am I having weird, they studied my heart. I had an echocardiogram done. You want to know what that is? It's like an ultrasound of your heart. It was really cool, and I got to see my heart next to me in a little video screen. At the end of all this, they put me on a treadmill, like the whole Rocky training montage stuff. And at the end of it, they said, nope, there's nothing wrong with your heart. You have the heart of an 18-year-old. Like, oh, okay. And what they're basing that on is the output, how much oxygen your heart can hold, all that stuff that I don't understand because I'm not a biologist. But cardiovascular health, that's important. How does your heart perform? Do you have the heart of an 80-year-old? I hope not, because you're only 20 years old, but maybe you do. Respiratory function is number 2. All right, every time you go to the doctor, you take a lot of deep breaths. As long as you're going to a well visit once a year. So respiratory function is a big one. And then we'll make these, I'm actually going to make these lists a little bit shorter even than last time. Muscle tone and strength. So again, in the biological realm, it's all things that you could probably think of. But I'm glad I didn't show you Ernestine. She's going to actually become part of our class later. But every time I think of functional age, and I think of the biological realm, the woman you're about to see is literally my hero. I hope I could do something like this as well. I guess you can see it. It's cheating. So she's 80 years old. She certainly doesn't act or look like an 80-year-old, but maybe that's because we have what an 80-year-old is supposed to look like already defined in our heads. Maybe there is no such thing as what they're supposed to look like.
I am Ernestine Shepherd, 80 years of age. I bench pressed 110 pounds. I started training at age 71. I was named the oldest female competitive bodybuilder at the Guinness Book of World Records. My sister and I started exercising together. I had never done any type of exercising before. Before she died, she said, promise me you will follow my dream and try to get in the Guinness Book of World Records. So that's what I did. I have been in 6 or 7 competitions. I win, but some I come out second and third, and I'm pleased with that. I'm up every morning at 2:30. After I have my devotions, I walk and I run approximately 10 miles. I'm at the gym at 7:30, and I have a group of ladies that I train. I train all ages. One of the youngest, I think she's about 20 years of age. And the rest go from 40 all the way up to 80. When people come to my class for the very first time, they are really, really surprised. They said, I didn't think this exercise would be this tough, but if you can do it, we are going to do it too. I really don't feel as though I'm 80 years of age, but I am. I want to keep training until my day is done.
Raise your hand if you feel lazy. Yeah, I feel every time she's inspiring, but then also demoralizing at the same time. But when did she start? And this is planting a seed. A lot of the stuff in chapter 1 is literally just planting seeds for future stuff. When did she start training? 71.
Oh, 71.
No, what did you say?
I thought said 17.
Oh no, right? You would think, right? Because you look at her like she must have been like an Olympic athlete when she was 21, of course. No, not at all. 71 is when she picked up her first weight and actually started training. So it's, I guess, her theme, and more to come on this, is it's never too late to start, actually. And you might be really surprised, I hope you are, by the changes that can happen, even to someone who's 75 and picks up a barbell, right, and has done nothing their whole life. The changes that can happen and happen quickly when they actually start working out and training. So back to that idea of frailty as a myth, certainly. So then we get to the psychological realm. What kind of things do we assess to determine your functional age? Well, one is your mental health, something that you might ignore, something that a lot of people ignore. But how, just in general, how do you cope with stress? Do you suffer from anxiety, depression? If you do, or do you get treated? Or have you let things go? So your mental health, clearly number one in the psychological realm. And the second, what might be other things? What might you think would go into this when you think of aging and psychological function? Well, let's do two more. You're lucky. The other ones have 4 on each. I decided to whittle it down to 3. Shorter lists are good, right? Memory function. Memory function is a big one. Every video you watch of people studying older people, there's some kind of, I'm going to say 5 words. Boat, house, cow, light bulb. And then, right, there's always memory tests. And then, of course, intelligence tests. So memory, intelligence, and your mental health. And finally, which we're going to zoom in on the next slide as well, your social age. Another thing a lot of people, I think, take for granted. Now, this is a really important seed we're planting. We'll actually come full circle to this in the very last lecture that we have. The importance of your social function when it comes to aging. And what gets thrown into here? Well, number one would be your career. What is it that you do for a living? Staying active actually is linked to longer life. One of the reasons I like this job so much. Anyone know Steve Kramer? We would probably call him Dr. Kramer. He does the social group that goes to other countries once a year in a normal universe, of course. He retired 10 years ago when I came here. I took his place, but he's still around, right? When you're a professor, you actually never have to quit. You can stick around and teach forever. Well, it turns out that kind of stuff is important. It's your career. What do you do for a living? And are you still, remember the 94-year-old stock trader? Right, in the document, the first person you saw in this class. So number 2 would be your family and friends, your relationships. I'll just throw both the family and peers, your social network. And of course, like the saying goes, it's not the quantity, it's the quality of these relationships. So this isn't about, I need to gain 8 more friends before I turn 30. No, you have one really awesome one, awesome. The key is having some, not a lot. The key is not being isolated. And then the last thing that goes into here, something that a lot of people might not think about, is community. How engaged are you? Are you connected somehow to the community that you live in? It doesn't matter how. You don't have to be president of the school board. Do you do something? Are you engaged in their greater community? So all these factors roll into your functional age. And they're all things that are important to your functional age. But zooming in on that social one, before we're actually going to hop and skip into chapter 2. There are ways that the environment, so things that are more or less out of your control. There are things around you in the environment that are going to impact your development as you go now from emerging adulthood all the way into supercentenarian life. 3 different ways that society impacts you in your development. Again, these are largely out of your control. Well, they are out of your control. But the three major types of social influences on your development. This is closing out chapter 1. These are your last definitions. Build our glossary. And I go backwards. That was beautiful. The first type of social influence on your development is what we categorize as normative age-graded influences. I told Monday's group this. When I was a freshman at the Ohio State University, lots of things happened. But one thing that happened that I noticed really quickly is this guy came in my room, and he's like, "Hi, how you doing?" He shook my hand. He was kind of short. He had a big goatee-ish type thing. Shook my hand really vigorously. I thought I was meeting some kind of worker in the dorm, or I hadn't really met my RA yet. I thought maybe this is my RA. But the guy was clearly older. In fact, if I had to ballpark it, he was somewhere in his 30s. Turned out he was 42. I guess his functional age, right? He was doing better. He was a freshman at The Ohio State University, and he lived in the dorm 3 doors down. And when he first told me, I always feel bad about this because I started laughing. That was I thought he was just joking. He wasn't joking at all. His name was Glenn, and he was in the military, and he had done stuff in the military. But he always wanted to go to college. He always wished that he had gone to college. He just never did. He never really knew what he wanted to do anyway. So he joined the military, and his dream, though, was always to come back and go through college. And now that he had gone to the military, he had the money to do this and kind of do whatever he wanted. He wasn't married and all this stuff. And he didn't want to just go to college. He wanted to have the real traditional college experience of leaving home and going into a dorm. And there's no rule that says when you're 45, you can't be a freshman in college and live in a dorm. It's different, but there's no rule that says you can't do it. He was defying the normative age-graded influences. I told you something that's the opposite. Normative age-graded influences are what you guys are doing. There's 2 words to write down. Social scripts. That's what normative age-graded influences are. The social script. As you develop and as you get older, there are certain things that society tells you, okay, now's the right time to do this. It doesn't mean you have to follow that script. Not at all, in fact. In fact, your life is probably more interesting if you don't. But the normative age-graded influences pushes your development. Some of you know in another life, another career, I'm a marriage and family therapist. You know how many couples I've met who got married solely for the reason that they just kind of felt pressured to get married because they were around 30 and they knew that most people around 30 get married? That's why they got married. I mean, they liked each other. But now they're having problems and maybe divorcing. And when we talk about why you got married, it wasn't just oh, you swept me off my feet and I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. It was well, we're getting lots of pressure. We just felt all our friends were getting married. It just felt like that's what we had to do. That's normative age-graded influences. Why did you come to college right after high school? Did you even pause and think, maybe I should just get a job for 8 years? Or did you feel some kind of pressure, right? Not everyone, but most people did it. Now, you might have an idea what you wanted to do, but if you stop and think about it, isn't it kind of weird that we all just we go here, okay, now we go here, now we go here, now we get married, now we buy the house. Those are normative age-graded influences, and they will, at some point, maybe they haven't yet, but they will push your development in a certain way. Because society says, does this make sense? I probably talked about it more than I had to. All right, well, number 2, that's not all we have. I almost fell down. If there's one positive thing about the coronavirus, it's that it is a perfect example of this. Usually when I've talked about this, I've never had a real-time example, but now I do. Normative history-graded influences will shape your development. This probably isn't the first one that you've had, but I'm not part of your generation. Let me just walk you through mine. Let's see. Oh, there was Columbine. That was a big thing. 9/11, that was sort of a big thing. Well, and now this. This has been kind of a big thing that's pushed our development. Normative history graded influences are big cultural, social events that happen that impact an entire generation. Columbine was so big and influential, it literally changed public schools so much that you guys don't even know what it was like to go to a public school before that. It changed within a couple years. Everything changed. It's still weird for me that I can't just go to my daughter's school and just go in. Why can't I just go? I can't just go into school? Doesn't it seems foreign to you, right? Where's the check? And first go in the airlock, and then get the X-ray, and then get patted down, and then sign the form, and then give me your ID, and then we'll get back to you in 2 weeks, and then you can sit outside and talk to your daughter from the parking lot, right? It's like boom. No, I used to go back to my high school and just walk in and talk to my old teachers, like, hey, what's going on? Because it's school, and the doors are open. They're always, but anyway, you get the point. Normative history grade. This is impacting your development somehow. In fact, who's going to forget this? And we're never going to forget this. We don't have the answers of how yet, because we won't know until 5-6 years from now. But this is shaping your development, your generation, especially you guys, because you guys are in that high school. Some of you for some of you, this was senior year of high school, freshman year of college, maybe it's your senior year of college, right? There are big things going on, and this is just messing with it in some stupid way. So we'll figure that out. And then finally, the third one, non-normative influences. Non-normative influences are big things, just like normative history graded, but they're more focused on just you. They can be both negative and positive, although psychology always seems to focus on the negative ones. This will shape your development. This will hinder you. Well, this could be positive too. Maybe you will win the lottery. Actually, there's research on that too that shows that might not be such a positive thing. But anyway, so big things that happen to you. Maybe you write a book and it becomes famous. Awesome. Who knows what's going to happen to you? But non-normative influences, big things that happen to you that are so big, they literally change your path. Your course gets altered just a little bit. Any questions? I feel like we're making better time somehow than the other section. But, oh well, maybe we'll talk about some stuff that they didn't think about. Well, that officially closes out chapter 1. So if you make some kind of significant alteration in your notes, draw a thick line, whatever it is, chapter 1, all done. Basic concepts, basic terms, trends, planting seeds, really. And then chapter 2, we'll get started with this. We'll hover here. I mean, obviously, it's this week. We'll finish kind of like last week. We'll finish chapter 2 next week. We'll get the ball rolling. We'll get started on this. But I think in every class you take in psych, every different topical class you take, at least, there's always a part of the class. We're doing it in my humor class right now. We're talking about all the different theoretical perspectives that try to explain a person's sense of humor. Well, just like any other class, there's all types of theories that try to explain adult development, right? From a psychological point of view, a biological point of view, and of course, a social point of view. Anyone know what this is? I don't think anyone's in the humor class in here. It's based off of a really famous poem. You don't need to write it down, but whenever I talk about theoretical perspectives in a class, well, most times, it doesn't work its way into all my classes, but if I remember to, I had a professor show this once, and he made us sit there for like 10 minutes and try to figure out what it is we were looking at. And then he finally told us because no one got the answer. This is based off a famous poem. Supposedly, and I don't have the poem memorized, it would be really profound and philosophical, but I would screw it up anyway. These 6 men, there's 6 of them, 6 men of Indostan, that's what it's called. and they're all blind. And they've been put in front of something. They don't know what this something is, but they're all allowed to touch it. And they're all obviously touching different parts of the elephant. I always kind of laugh because apparently they're also deaf and can't smell, or maybe they would, right? But maybe all of their senses are gone. They're like Helen Keller. So they're all touching this thing, and then they're all asked to describe what it is that you're touching. But of course they can't see, so they don't know. All they can hold is the part that they're touching or whatever it is. So they all try to explain what it is they're touching, and they're all wrong because they don't know what everyone else is touching, right? But at the same time, they're all correct because they're explaining exactly what it is that they're feeling and they're touching. And if we put all their answers together, then it becomes really clear. And then they figure it out at the end. Oh, it was an elephant. Because this one talks to that one, tells him what he was experiencing. Does this make sense? This, if no one's ever showed you this before, maybe this will just keep this in the back of your brain. Whenever you go into a class and people present you with the theory of fill in the blank, whatever it is, human development, brain science, it doesn't matter what theory, what class or what discipline you're talking about. No theory describes everything. There is no theory of everything that describes it all. This is going to be kind of the same way. There's multiple different theoretical perspectives. They all serve their own purpose. And when you put them all together, that's when you get a really clear picture of what human development is like. Does that make sense? So they're all a little different. So when you hear the different theories, don't think, well, now wait a second. This only describes a little bit of human development. That's true. But, oh, there's the little quote. This whole time, I didn't have it up there. Anyway. Well, there's lots of different theories. But before we open the door to those, don't you love lists? Lots of lists today. This one does have 4. There are 4 just basic assumptions about how we develop. I guess we weren't done building our glossary of terms. You might have heard these terms before. If you have, congratulations. These are just general terms that exist. The first concept about human development is called multifinality. Anyone know what that means? It's neither positive or negative. It's just a reality. The answer is kind of in the word itself. Multiple finality. Multiple finality. Put it together. Sesame Street. What this means is, from the same starting point, there are multiple different possible outcomes. From the same starting point. You're all here right now. You're in your 20s. You're at the University of Mount Union. People often ask me when they're 19 and 20, like, what can I do with the psych degree? And they hate my answer. Because I tell them, whatever you want to do with it. There is no one path. It doesn't matter what degree you get, actually, at the University of Mount Union. What do you want to do with it? So that's multifinality. Same starting point. I could find you 10 psych grads for the past 10 years. They're all doing very different things. Trust me. Some things that aren't even seemingly related to psychology. So multifinality. Then our next concept, it's not really the opposite. It's just different. Equifinality. What this means is people can come from multiple different starting points and all end up in the same destination. So if you want to draw multifinality, you have a single point with lots of lines going out from it. If you want to draw equifinality in your head, you have lots of lines all coming to the same point. That's you guys. You're all here. You somehow magically found your way into adulthood and aging. Congratulations. But you all came from very different places. There's no one path to get to the University of Mount Union, where exceptional begins. Yeah. All right, so multifinality, equifinality. Then we have something called reciprocity. This is good news. I'll tell you the same quick story that I told Monday's section, because it just popped in my head. When I started talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, this happened. This happened my second year that I was here. Actually, my third year that I was here. There was a girl named Cheyenne. I don't know what Cheyenne is doing right now, but Cheyenne was a student. She wasn't a psych major. She was in education, but she popped up in classes randomly. I think she was trying to minor in psych. I had her for intro, like my first year here. And then the next year, she took my abnormal class. And then I don't remember what other class she just randomly popped up. And it was always good to see her. She was a really good student. She's always really engaged. She really seemed to like the classes. She really got into it. And so it was like, oh, Cheyenne, how you doing? So that was Cheyenne. Well, one day, I was literally just sitting in my office, just procrastinating, watching roller coaster videos or something like that. And I get a knock on my door. And I turn around and it's Cheyenne. But she's like, I could tell she'd been crying. Like something is going on. Like, oh no. So I was like, well, come on in. And she shuts the door. And then she just starts bawling. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on. What was going on for her was she was having a midlife crisis at the age of 20. She hated education. She did not want to be a teacher. She literally, she did her student teaching and she just hated every minute of it. And she never wanted to be an educator. The only reason she was in education was because her parents told her, this is what we want you to major in. Her dad was a teacher and her mom was a teacher and her sister was a teacher. So she had to be a teacher, right? But she hated this. She loved psychology. She loved every class that she took in our department, regardless if it was for me or someone else. And she wanted to change her major, but she was scared to death. She didn't want to tell her parents because she was afraid it was going to happen. She was convinced it was too late to change her major. Well, this is reciprocity in action. What reciprocity means, and the reason I tell you that is usually you hear these terms and you just think, okay, that makes sense. And then when you think about how it actually impacts people, reciprocity says this: the world around you is going to influence you, no doubt. We just walked through those different ways. Your environment is going to push your development. Of course it is. And by environment, we mean things like family, Mount Union, whoever's around you, your friends, your peers. But the opposite is also true. You have an impact on your environment. Sometimes in a very, very small way, sometimes in a profound way, you can change the environment that you live in. You're not just some helpless victim floating around an environment getting pushed in this direction. You could be a pinball if you'd like to. And that day, Cheyenne actually decided to impact her environment. The good news is, long story short, it wasn't easy, but she did change her major. She graduated on time. And she was very happy by the time she ended. And it wasn't easy, but she chose to have an impact on her environment. Another really simple way, this is someone who sat right behind you on Monday. They're not here, but they're here with us, aren't they? When you feel the Monday class, the spirits are with us. Some of them might be watching this right now. But he brought up the point of he always asks questions in class. And it always changes, I go off on tangents that I didn't mean to for 10 minutes, but he asks good questions. That's another example. When you're in a class, your professor has a plan, right? Well, I kind of have a plan sometimes because it's a rough PowerPoint slide up there, but you could change a class by asking one question. You could change the whole half hour of what's going to happen next because you might have a discussion about something. So do it. We love it, actually. In fact, it's one of my least favorite things about these things is people have gotten quieter, and it drives me bananas. But anyway, if you can't tell, I'm good at entertaining myself. So finally, this last one, now this is the only one on this list that is dedicated solely to adult development. I mean, multifinality exists everywhere. Doesn't matter if we're talking about business or art or psychology. So does equifinality and so does reciprocity. But ageism is a basic assumption, an unfortunate basic assumption. Maybe this will change someday. In fact, it'd be awesome if this could be wiped off the list. But it's a reality. And by the way, ageism doesn't just impact older people, although it mainly does. It also impacts you. People make assumptions about you based off of your age. Ageism, of course, so in our terms for this class, ageism is specifically discriminating against someone because of their perceived age, and all of the assumptions that go along with that, some of which we've already hopefully debunked in this class. So it's discriminating against someone. I'm a therapist, so I'm always thinking of people and what's going on for them. This right now actually is, some people say it might be it. We don't know because it's not over yet. And if you didn't know, people aren't actually coming to therapy right now. You might think people are coming to therapy in droves, but they're not. They're staying away because people have lost things like jobs and insurance, and they're just not coming. So, but anyway, ageism right now is a very significant problem because there's a lot of people. When I'm having a really good day, I wake up, and to be honest, I am thankful that I have this job because it's still a job, right? But there's a lot of people my age, well, in your age, but a lot of people your parents' age, maybe it's impacted you, that have literally lost their entire career. It's gone because of what's been going on. Well, what do you do if you're, I mean, think about you, how many of you have spent at least a few minutes worrying or being concerned about what job you might get after college? Of course you have, like, right? My God. Well, imagine being 55 and your job being gone and you have to hit the restart button. That's a whole different level of concern. Well, and that's kind of what we're talking about. So I've been talking for about 40 minutes. I'm going to shut up and let you watch this.
A common misconception about ageism is that it's only a problem that affects older people. And indeed, we do live in a society that is obsessed by youth. Open any magazine, look at any billboard, watch any TV show.
Everybody's going to age. It is this one place that we all have something in common. Policies that are good for families should be good for people of all ages. We should be thinking of ways to have government policies that are supportive of older people, supportive of kids, supportive of people in the middle.
When an employer sees my resume or my LinkedIn profile and they see that I have 20 or more years of experience, I think that's a signal of, oh, he's too old to work for us. And I am struggling financially, and I'm really scared. I'm really scared. I've been struggling to find work for a couple years now. When I eliminate all the other options, it seems like one of the big things is because I'm over 50. It's just sort of some impressions and vibes, and that's really, it's so ephemeral, I can't really pin that down. I mean, I've had some really great phone interviews, and it's fast and snappy and terrific and amazing, and then I walk in the door, and there seems to be a mood shift. I know my partner has a great job, but he can't support us both, and especially not in New York. We can't kind of sustain this rent without me also working. I've had some really bad bouts of depression. I think the night before, okay, tomorrow's gonna be the day. I'm gonna get up at 6 and I'm gonna job hunt from 6 in the morning till 7 at night. And I'm not gonna take breaks. I'm just gonna power through it. It's the numbers game. And then you wake up and you're like, I don't have anywhere to go today. Then that stuff starts to drip in, right? I'm useless, nobody needs me, I'm worn out, oh my God, I'm only 53. How could I not have any more usefulness left in me? I have a great concern of, I'm not even sure, like, be homeless, and that's scary to even vocalize. But that's my real fear.
I'll leave that up. We're not done yet, but instead of watching it all and then interjecting some stuff, let's watch a little bit, interject it, and then close it out with this too. So ageism, you know what that is? It's discriminating essentially against older people because of their age. In a major way, not the only way, but a major way it does impact them is finding jobs and careers and getting out there. In fact, this just happened in our department. I mean, we weren't discriminatory, but we just had a job hunt. Some of you will know this a couple years ago. That's why we have Dr. Cook now. But I remember one of the applicants, she was like 70 years old. She came in and taught some classes, and she told us flat out that she was really worried to even apply. And believe it or not, she almost got the job. So, but she told us how nervous she was and how weird it was going to colleges, right? And she knows everyone else applying for that job is probably right out of grad school, and the young professor ready to change the world. And here she is with 40 years of experience. And we were, to believe it or not, no offense, Dr. Cook, we were actually looking for someone with experience because we had a specific thing that we were trying to do. But anyway, over here. So what causes ageism? Well, lots of different ideas about what has led to this plague that we have. 4 different explanations that when we put them all together, probably gives you a clear picture of why this is an issue, and maybe some ideas about how we could battle it. Because if we can understand it, so we can dissect ageism. The first is something called disengagement theory. I'm not even going to ask, I'm going to bet no one's ever heard of this. It's actually a good thing you haven't heard of it. It's been scrubbed clean from psych textbooks and human development textbooks. But disengagement theory, if you would have gone to a human development class 50 years ago, you would have read about disengagement theory. The basic thing that disengagement theory said is it's normal, and here's the really hurtful part, desirable. It's normal and desirable for an older adult to slowly disengage from the workforce. What? I guess maybe when the average lifespan was 53, because you'd like to have at least 6 months of retirement, it's both normal and desirable. Right? And you know how psych stuff goes. Come on, back in the 1900s, Freud said something, everyone just believed it and ran with it. Well, that must be it. Same held true with disengagement theory. There was just this idea that it's normal and desirable. Older people, they don't really want to work. So socially, we really didn't invest in even the concept of an older person applying for a job. Is it still around? No, and you haven't heard of it, but it's still, right, it has a legacy, this idea, which, by the way, is connected to the question that I asked you about 65. We decided years ago when we invented Social Security, this is just like trivia for your next cocktail party, you need to write it down. We decided when we invented Social Security that 65 was it. In fact, you can get forced into retirement at age 65 in some places. Like, wow, forced? What if you don't want to? Come on, you're 65, dude, get out of here. We got a lot of 20-year-olds waiting to get in the door. Well, I don't want to go. Too bad. So we decided that 65 was old, you're done, go retire, go live somewhere. Of course, the second one we've already written down, so there's really nothing to write down under this because you did it last week. All those myths, all those overgeneralizations that we went through last week. Well, we can't hire him. I know he has 20 years of experience, but Jesus, the old there. Like he's going to forget things, right? He's not going to be able to learn new things. Can he even use a mouse? This is a laptop, right? You talk to older people like that. Can grandma use Facebook? So the third one, this is a fun one. Terror management theory. How many of you have, if you're honest, how many of you have maybe a subtle or moderate fear of getting older? Like really old. Not like, I don't mean like 40, unless you think of it as old, and if you do, I'm insulted. Or just dying in general. Is there any anxiety about getting older or dying? I raise my hand. Well, that's where terror management theory comes in. Terror management theory says because of this natural fear of getting older and dying that so many people have, we, maybe unconsciously even, keep a distance, a social distance from older people. We just don't want them around. In other words, this theory is this is a kind of a deep psychological theory. It's saying you sort of unconsciously deal with your own anxiety about getting older by not really connecting to older people in a meaningful way. It doesn't mean you're rude to them. It just means if there's 2 people in the room and one's 25 and one's 95, you'll be nice and polite to the 95-year-old, but you might actually get to know the 25. Well, why? That's a human being. Well, maybe it has to do with your own just fear of getting older. That's what this one says. And then finally, What this guy is dealing with specifically is something called modernization. And modernization is the culturally accepted idea that a younger person is simply more fit for employment than an older individual. In other words, the older you get, you age out because of things like technology. Remember, when this whole thing happened, I remember we had this focus group, and of course, I teach this class, so I'm keeping this in the back of my head, like how insulting. Like we have lots of professors here of all different ages. And I remember we had this like focus group of what do we do with the older professors who are 50 and 55 and might not know the ways of the internet. Are you kidding me? You don't think they can figure it out? This dude with a PhD in philosophy, I'm sure he can handle it, right? But that's modernization, this idea that we sort of teched our way out of older individuals being suitable to get hired, regardless of the industry you're talking about. Did you catch what his job is? A corporate event planner? Okay, that's a thing. Really, a 55-year-old can't do that. And he has 20 years of experience. He's the guy that I'd want planning my event, actually, not the 20-year-old. Sorry. But anyway, but that's what ageism is. So those are the 4 reasons. Close this out.
We've had a lifetime to internalize these messages, and most of us it's never even occurred to us to challenge them. For example, I stopped blaming my sore knee on being 65 because my other knee doesn't hurt and it's just as old. We all are bombarded with negative messages about age and aging from childhood on. We are all prejudiced. Anytime you look at a young person in a job and you resent the fact that they're your manager simply because they're younger than you, for example, that's ageism. So I'm really an advocate for telling both sides of the story. I'm not a Pollyanna that says everything about aging is easy and it's all going to be great. But let's also acknowledge all the ways in which it enriches us.
Social Security. It started with a bill passed by Congress in 1935, and it became law a few days later when the bill was signed by the President of the United States.
When Social Security was created in the 1930s, we arbitrarily came up with this idea that 65 was old. And we've never adjusted it in all of those years, and life has changed a lot.
This Social Security measure gives at least some protection to 50 million of our citizens who will reap direct benefits through unemployment compensation, through old age pensions.
We all know that we're living longer, we're living healthier lives, yet we're kind of stuck in this notion of what old is.
I kind of toggle back and forth between these ties. You know, it really depends, I think, on my perception of the mood and the emotion of the company. When I'm preparing for an interview, I really am always mindful of my hair and my beard. I've gone into interviews where I've, literally agonized for hours. And that's, of course, incredibly frustrating. A couple of years ago, there was a young lady in maybe her mid-20s. She said, well, my friends can't find jobs. You know, the baby boomers, they just need to, give us their jobs. They need to stop working. They need to stop working. And it kind of made me kind of scared. And then I kind of looked at her in a different way because I thought, oh, she's not on my side. She's my opponent.
This zero-sum game approach just gets us into a lot of trouble. Advocating for older people does not mean forgetting about younger people. So it's really important that we start thinking about how do we lift everybody's boat and how do we not think of it as a competition for resources. We created a one-year fellowship that's an organized way to bring kind of a new source of talent into often very resource-starved nonprofits, and it's having really good results.
The idea is not to elevate the status of older people to be higher or better. It is to try and figure out a way to live together where the difference between old and young, which is real, is respected, where we capitalize on certain things, you know, that younger people possess physical energy more of, and that older people possess experience, and build on each other's strengths, of course.
So what I do here every day is sit at this computer and I write endless letters, cover letters, emails, short notes. I'm reaching out to acquaintances, friends, people I don't know. Try to be confident and upbeat. But it's not really easy, and I'm really struggling really hard. I'm healthy and I'm alive and I'm smart and I can think and I can work. Just, need to work.
Every time I watch this, I really hope you found a job. So that's it. That's your live section for week 3. Dramatic ending, right? Get out of here. As you're packing up, this just popped in my head as we were watching that. Ageism has certainly popped up with this, the coronavirus. Like, I know a lot of people. Like, those Facebook friends that you have that you don't really engage with, and they post things, and you're like, oh my god. But you just kind of keep them around because the oh my god moments are just so fun. I know several people who have posted things like, why are we vaccinating the 85 and over? They're done. And like they have nothing, they literally say that. And then go back to the 65, we should be vaccinating the 20-year-olds. We're the ones that are out there, maybe even spreading this thing. The older people, they're done. If they die, they die. This killing off the weak. Holy shit. It's so, when you watch this, and it's not surprising that people would have this idea that, why even care? They have nothing more to offer. They're old. They've lived this life. Let them just go. Anyway, that's out there. Just so you know, maybe you were laughing, so maybe you can relate to that. All right, that's it. Oh, and if you haven't done so, find your older person, 65 and up. Next week that'll become something. So not for this week, but I will awkwardly end the stream.